Hello, and welcome to episode number 1 of the Outdoor Minds podcast. I am your host, Callan Pilmanus, and today my guest is Kate Williams, CEO of 1% for the Planet. 1% is a tremendously influential organization in terms of environmental philanthropy. She has been with the organization since 2015. It was started several years ago by Yvon Chouinard of Patagonia, and it's been doing fantastic work helping companies funnel money to environmental causes. I reached out to Kate because I wanted to do an episode or two on conservation and the funding that comes from the outdoor industry. Our conversation reached well beyond that in talking about their organization and how it gets business done. Kate was extremely generous with her time. This being episode number 1, there was nothing out there on the internet to tell her that I was a competent interviewer, and she went along for the ride, and for that I am extremely grateful. I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. I hope you do too, and with that, here is Kate Williams. What I felt as a professional in the space was that there's a lot of topics that affect every segment within the outdoor industry, and conservation is one of them. And I know that 1% for the Planet supports environmental or public lands conservation, as one part of everything it does. But I could not think of a better guest to have on the show than you. And so I'm thrilled to have you here to talk about it and also just talk about a little bit of your professional history. I think as someone who loves the outdoors and loves the outdoor industry, I'm always curious as I look over the fence at other people and wonder, how did they end up in the position where they are? So now that I've sucked all of the air out of the room,
No, it's great.
Give
Great
me,
framing.
if you could give me and the audience a background of what your own history is, both, just living in and loving the outdoors, and maybe what you grew up doing and maybe what you like to do nowadays, as well as your professional history.
Yeah, sure. So thanks for that great intro. And I really appreciate just framing how the outdoor industry is more diverse, even as it's unified around some really common goals, which, we sometimes can forget.
Mm-hmm.
But I was fortunate to grow up in a family that, did spend a lot of time outside. So I have, great memories of, camping out in our old canvas tent. We didn't do big, high mountain adventures as a family, but we, went backpacking or went, car camping in Maine. And I have a really one particular memory of this night when we went camping and it was like pouring rain. And, we huddled on our little islands in the canvas tent and ate cold sandwiches. But even that was fun as a family. And just again, was fortunate to have parents who sent us out into the backyard to play and,
Mm-hmm.
things like that. So I did have a, comfort level in the outdoors and, was fortunate to have access. And then right after high school, I had my first experience in big mountains. I spent a month in the mountains in Wyoming with the National Outdoor Leadership School, NOLS. And
Yeah.
that was a really life-changing kind of pivotal experience for me because I loved it, the place. But also just the experience of being out there with that group and having some leadership opportunities. And it was definitely challenging. We had some adventures and misadventures on that course. And I really just loved all of it and loved who I got to be out there, in that place and with those challenges and opportunities. So, for me, that was really pivotal because from that point on, I was all right, in some way, shape or form, this is what I need to do. And I didn't really know exactly what this meant, but I knew I wanted to, work on behalf of the planet. And that is what I have spent my career doing. For the first part of my career, I was an outdoor educator. So kind of connecting people to those experiences in the belief that if more people have the opportunity to fall in love with the outdoors, they'll fight for it, they'll connect with it, they'll, be there for the planet. And then I shifted into working more on the advocacy side and environmental nonprofits. And, throughout all of that, was fortunate to get to continue to have more like personal adventures, backpacking, paddling. I now do a lot of like trail running and stuff like that. So I'm fortunate to still be able to get outside a lot.
Nice. So if I saw it correctly, you live in the Burlington, Vermont area?
Yeah, I live about an hour outside of Burlington. So I live in a little ski valley right in the mountains, which is nice. I can go out my back door and be in the woods, which I really appreciate.
Yeah. I can appreciate that too. Knowles is a great organization. I've only been able to take their wilderness first aid classes, but I strongly, anybody that I know that does any type of backpacking or hunting, where they're miles away from their car or civilization. It wasn't until I took a Knowles a wilderness first aid class, that I even understood how to use even half of the stuff that was in, the standard first aid kit that I've been packing out for so many years. And it's sobering to take the class and realize that, oh yeah, I could turn my ankle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I have no idea how to tape it up.
Yeah.
That's a very cool organization. So you've been in advocacy for a while, excuse me. So 1% for the Planet. If you could help the audience understand the organization and its history and how you got involved with it.
Sure. Yeah. So I've been CEO for 5 years now, and I came from another nonprofit where I was the executive director for 10 years. And so, really increasingly for me had been, just really interested in the, leadership and sort of how to like build and grow organizations. And that was really what brought me to 1%. And I came into 1% about when it was just about 15 years old. So it was founded in 2002. And it was founded by Yvon Chouinard, who's the founder of Patagonia, and his friend Craig Matthews, who owned a company called Blue Ribbon Flies in West Yellowstone. And, they essentially had like a riverbank realization in Montana when they were fishing, that their businesses depended on a healthy planet where people could do things like go fishing. And they are, smart people. And so they also were able to extrapolate out that like, while their businesses directly depend on, being able to go fishing, all businesses depend on a planet that's healthy enough to sustain an economy. So they created 1% as a way to build this movement of companies who give back to support the planet and to make the planet healthier for future generations. And so the organization, was then, spun out as its own nonprofit and has been working since that time. We're now 18 years old. We're actually coming up on 20 soon. Where with the focus of like building a network globally of companies, and we actually added individuals a few years ago who are making this commitment to give back. And we now have 3,300 businesses globally, about half and half US, international, in, multiple industries. People often, because of how we were founded, assume that we're kind of all outdoor industry, but it's actually a small segment of our total industry representation. So we have, we're in food and beverage, apparel, which is great. It's really, fun to, cut across a lot of different industries, including the outdoor industry.
Yeah, definitely. I actually have what I think is a funny Yvon Chouinard story. So when I was going to grad school, I was working full time for an outdoor brand in Southern California, and going to grad school, and I had been working in the outdoor industry for a few years, completely fallen in love with it. And through grad school, I had the opportunity to go see Yvon speak at a distinguished speakers series thing. It was right when Let My People Surfing, his book came out.
Yeah.
And so here I am, going to grad school and bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and looking forward to working in the outdoor industry for as long as they'll have me. And I get to see Yvon Chouinard speak. And so it was at the old downtown library in Los Angeles, beautiful building, and fantastic interview. And the Q&A session starts towards the end, and someone asked him a question about team building, and he made the comment. He says, "Yeah, I don't hire MBAs." And I just remember sitting there just feeling so crestfallen.
That's funny.
But I've since learned that just scanning LinkedIn, that there are a few MBAs working at
yeah. I think that may have changed.
Yeah. Yeah. So out of curiosity, I mean, that was the only time I've ever been in the room with Yvon, and as a founder to the organization, I'm sure his thumbprint remains there.
Mm-hmm.
How would you describe working for an organization that was started by such a strong personality?
Yeah, I have to say he's like the best of founders for us. He's he is so like strong in his like philosophical support for what we're doing, and really believes in the model, and so leans in terms of articulating that, but he's not at all in the mix on the day-to-day operations. So we benefit from the like strength of his convictions and his continued engagement as an activist himself, without what I know can sometimes be the challenge of navigating sort of operational decision making with the founder. So I've really appreciated his trust in me and in our organization, and his like support without again, like getting in the weeds. He has a lot of other weeds that he needs to tend to, because he's involved in a lot of things, and it's been great to have his like encouragement and often like push, and a lot of times we'll kind of have a like what would Yvon do moment,
Right.
but really feel also the freedom to like keep pushing the model forward.
That's great. So as I spent a lot of time researching your organization and trying to get an understanding, just from website and other articles online, I would almost describe it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I would almost describe it as kind of a matchmaking service for organizations, companies, and now individuals who want to commit 1% or more of their income to environmental causes. And I was really impressed with what I guess I would describe as a wide swath of organizations that 1% directs people and organizations to. So for the audience, can you describe of how the organization works?
Yeah, and I think I love that question, because I think the model is simple at one level. I mean, people hear our name and they're like, "Oh, cool, yeah, I get it." But then there's also lots of complexity behind the scenes in terms of how that works. And I think matchmaker is a term that others have used, and it's mostly right. I would say we would probably amend that to be more like relationship builder. And
Okay.
the distinction I make is that for us, like the way the money flows is that we don't operate as a foundation. So when a member joins, they're not giving us their 1% that we then distribute to nonprofits. They are making the commitment, and then we support them as essentially philanthropic advisors or consultants, whatever term you want to use, to really help each member figure out their business giving strategy. And we, the reason that moves it from like matchmaker to relationship builder is that, a match most companies could sort of figure out like, I'm interested in this, so like, give me a match, or like I can match with that. Relationship is like a little deeper, because we're really looking at like, what's the brand story that you want to tell? How engaged do you want your employees to be? Does it, do you want your giving to sort of map to where your company has a footprint? Those are all questions that there's no right answer to them, but each company gets to kind of create that. And then we introduce them to the nonprofits that that would kind of be a good fit for them strategically. And they're then able to, through their direct giving, build a relationship with those nonprofits that can then become so much more than just the check. So it can involve that volunteer level, it can involve the storytelling, things like that. And some companies come in with a pretty good idea of what they want to do. Some of our smaller companies are, everyone pays a small dues fee as part of their 1%. And for some of our smallest companies, like that's their 1%. And so they're like part of the network. And then they start their giving as they grow. They're giving to other nonprofits. So, it varies from company to company, but, overall across the totality of our membership, that relationship building is, and like building these lasting partnerships is a pretty core value that our team offers to our members.
That's fantastic.
And to those nonprofits as well.
Yeah, I appreciate the explanation. As I was referring to earlier, we talk about kind of cultural barriers, certainly within the outdoor industry, and again, 1% for the planet's reach, by the grace of God, goes far beyond that, right? But it's frustrating and sad at times to recognize how polarized the world has become in which we live, and it seems that constantly and probably amplified by social media, people feel some type of duty to put different people into different camps and different teams. And certainly within the world of environmental causes, I feel like I've seen and maybe because of the brands I've been involved with, we've seen people try to classify folks as pro hunting versus anti hunting. And I'm a Southern California native. I grew up with skateboards and punk rock, and I didn't get involved into the outdoors until I was in my 20s. My dad, you described your upbringing. My dad always said that his version of camping is a hotel room without cable, and so I got involved late, and as someone who got involved late, I had a lot of learning to do myself, including about hunting, and as I know you're keenly aware of, the hunting side of the outdoor world has done great things for conservation. And so as I was scanning the 1% website and looking at different organizations under the 6 different categories, and we should get into that in a second, I was really pleased to see that organizations like the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, and I believe I saw Ducks Unlimited was included there. So by no means does at least it appear that 1% is advocating for this camp, but not that camp. And I love the way that you described diving into an organization's core and what they stand for, and making sure that they are supporting and tied to other causes that are a good fit for them.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that question, because that is really important to us. So, the way we set up our nonprofits is we have 6 different issue areas, we call them. So we have climate, food, which is like where sustainable ag and things like that would go.
Hmm.
water, both fresh and ocean, so that's a big category. Land, so a whole variety of sort of conservation and various efforts associated with land, wildlife, and pollution. So those, every nonprofit, and many of them actually could fit in several, but every nonprofit ultimately lives in one category on our, in the way we organize it. And that's just like helpful with a lot of nonprofits. It's a way that we can sort of filter them, and that someone can sort of then begin to drill down to, who's the best fit. But you point out, something important. There are a lot of other ways you can sort of slice it in terms of sort of how someone engages with the outdoors, and that's where it gets into like really working with each company to understand what they're trying to accomplish. So you brought up Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, and there's some other ones too, and I'm blanking on the name right now, but we had one member who said, I really want my giving to make a clear statement that the environment should not be a partisan issue. So I want to make sure that I give not just to what are seen as like traditional green organizations, but also to, the more sort of hunting and fishing types of organizations, because I think those often speak to a different crowd. And I was like, you're brilliant. Thank you for like being so articulate about that. So that was one way that a company was using their giving strategy to not just support the environment, but to try and like make a clear statement about their belief that like we engage with the environment in a bunch of different ways, and it's meaningful to us in a bunch of different ways, and we need to support it in a bunch of different ways. So we definitely feel that there's a place, a valuable place in the environmental community for those hunting and fishing organizations. We've gotten some pushback at times because there are people who don't share that belief, and I think the beauty of our model is like, that's fine. Like, if that's not where you as a member want to allocate your giving, you don't have to. We're not telling you that that's what you need to do. We are, not going to sort of shy away from having a point of view that those nonprofits, play a valuable role in terms of, protecting land in some cases, advocating in other cases, like doing the work to, protect both places and ways to experience place and to connect to place that are really important.
Yeah, that's great. Um, so, so I saw, or you mentioned earlier, the six different, I think you call them
Issue
issues.
areas.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that 1%, how 1% classifies and directs people to. But you also mentioned, as you and I were exchanging emails, that there's, especially in the current climate, with the protests that are going on in our country currently about justice and equality of justice, in our society, both globally and certainly within the United States, that there is an additional aspect to 1% charitable support that you're taking on. Do you want to talk about that as well?
Yeah, sure. And I also really appreciate that question. So, again, in the same way that those six categories are like one way to like organize information, and there are other like cross cuts, and one of those is environmental justice. So there can be, organizations in any one of those areas that are addressing climate with an eye to its impacts on the most vulnerable communities, many of which are Black, many of which, have been systematically made to be vulnerable. And so, we have had and, have made sure to include environmental justice focused nonprofits for a while, but, in the, recent eruption of, a higher level of attention in the wake of the George Floyd murder, we felt that we were called on to accelerate that work and to get much stronger in that area. So actually today, as we're recording this, is Juneteenth. And as part of that, we are releasing a blog post with a expanded list of those nonprofits that kind of sit in that intersection of environment and justice. And it's been, it's felt really right and just important to our staff to do this. Like we come from the, pretty white history of environmentalism. We're aware of that. And so, this has been a moment to really accelerate work that we've wanted to move into in order to deliver our mission. Our mission is to, engage people to create a future that is healthy for both planet and people. And you can't have, if there's injustice and violence in the streets, that doesn't, you can't have both, if that makes sense. So all to say, like, for us, this is like, feels totally aligned with our mission. And we've felt sort of called on in these, recent weeks to really accelerate and, move this work forward, to bring in those nonprofits that are working in that intersectional space. And as we look ahead, we're going to be, really digging into, like, how do we define that space, and like, how do we, make sure that our, the way we're engaging with companies to develop their strategies includes, an articulation of that as an important facet of giving. Again, just because a just planet and a healthy planet have to go together, or you can't have either. So that's, that's some of the work that we're doing right now, and there's lots for us to learn, and lots of partners who I'm sure will be important in helping us to think better and more clearly about this. But we're taking some steps and listening and learning as much as we can.
That's great. I appreciate that explanation. So if we were just to go through the process, or 1%'s process for organizations, companies, people who want to commit, they say, we have done our soul searching. We recognize how critically important it is to support the environment that, in case of the outdoor industry, that we depend on for our consumer base, for our brands, even outside of that. You talked about sustainable farming, and that's a critical topic for everybody who lives on this planet. So an organization contacts you and says, look, this is something we want to do. We want to commit to this, but we don't even know how to get started.
Yeah.
What does that process look like?
Yep. We love that question, because we love it when people call with that question, because like that's what we do. And we've really tried to create the process so that it's really easy to take that step. So our whole belief is, like, everyone has a 1%, and addressing environmental issues can feel very overwhelming. So we don't want joining 1% for the planet to also feel overwhelming. We want it to be a way that you can take action and, like, sort of get on the path, or like continue the journey that you've already begun. So basically, if you were to call with your company and say, hey, I want to join, we'd arrange a call and, like, explain, make sure you understood the model. And then, basically you sign up and pay your dues, which is based on your budget size. That's a small part of your 1%, or, kind of steps up as you get bigger, but it, continues to be part of your 1%. And then as soon as you've done that, you have access to using the logo to, like, fully engaging in the network. And there's a lot to engage in. We, in a year that's not this year, we have a lot of events. We have global summits. We had to cancel our summit in LA this spring, but we've rescheduled it for next year. We have European summits. So, there's a lot of ways that we, create opportunities for members to engage with other members and with other nonprofits to just be part of the network. So that's a huge value of it too. So you do your giving and we certify that, but you also, like, get access to this amazing peer network. But then during that first year that you're a member, that's when our team says, all right, how do you want to do your giving? Like, what's the brand story you want to tell? What's the, where do you want to give? All of those questions that I ran through earlier and more. And we really try and learn, like, what's the giving relationship that is going to, be most powerful for you. And then during that first year, you figure out your giving and you do that giving. And at the end of your first year, and then at the end of every subsequent year of your membership, we would certify that giving. And so we have a certification process to just verify giving receipts against your total revenue. And that's a really powerful piece of the model, because in this day and age, with consumers more interested in companies and driving change, and with their dollars being part of driving that change, they are interested in brands that have a purpose, but they're also skeptical of brands that might say they have a purpose. And 1% for the Planet is a third-party verification that, like, oh no, like this company is actually making a big commitment and we're certifying it every year. So it has meaning in the marketplace, which is a really important value of it. And you get access to that right away. And then, then you get onto this annual cycle.
Yeah, I love what you're saying about substantiating these organizations' claims on their values. It's been really interesting over the last few weeks in light of the murder of George Floyd, and so many people and organizations standing up and making declarations that they do recognize that Black Lives Matter. I've also seen, particularly in social media, a lot of blowback in terms of consumers, members of the public, calling out companies that feel an urgency to make a public statement, but don't necessarily have a plan to back it up. And I'm one of the most cynical people that I know, and I don't want to paint a negative light on these companies. That at least they're speaking up and saying something. But it does expose how vulnerable a company or a brand can make themselves by declaring that they are an environmentalist organization, for example, but not being able to provide any quantifiable evidence that they're putting their money and their actions where their mouth is.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you bringing that up. And we hope that we can, as we ourselves grow and learn in this racial justice space, which we are underway doing that, we hope that the 1% certification and giving can also be a way in which companies can, drive real change, like invest real dollars in nonprofits that are working in that space. And the 1% for the Planet logo can, provide that certification that, hey, it's not just words, there's actually, substantial, legitimate investment happening also.
That's great. So in terms of the word certification, I want to make sure that I understand this correctly. You're obviously certifying the organizations, the giving organizations who have signed up and made that commitment. But my understanding, I'm just doing my own research, it sounds like you're also certifying the organizations that are on the receiving end of funds as well. Is that correct?
It's a good clarifying question, and I tweak the language. So the certification that we do is for our members, and those are the businesses and individuals who are giving money to nonprofits, and we certify that they have given their 1%. Okay. And so that's how we use the term certification. We do vet and approve any nonprofits who come into our network. So we have a process that's information-based to, make sure that their focus, their work, the way they're measuring impact, all of that, is, legitimately, falls into one of our categories. And so, so then part of what we're also providing to those companies is not only are we going to certify your giving, but we're also going to help you as companies to feel confident that you're giving to, legit, credible nonprofits who are driving real change. And that's important too for a lot of our companies. They're like, well, we don't know, and we don't want to give to a company or a nonprofit that's, cooking the books or, any of the things that, there's also skepticism about nonprofits. And, most nonprofits are awesome and doing great work, but it is important to like make sure that you trust that they're doing what they say they're going to do with your money. And we play the role of like doing that screening.
That's great. Without naming names, when an organization, nonprofit, doesn't make the screening, it doesn't read the requirements, typically what are the types of things that keep you from giving that type of stamp of approval?
Yeah, the way our process works is that for nonprofits to even be considered, they have to be recommended by a staff member or a member.
Okay.
And so a lot of the screening happens at that level because they usually don't make it up the chain unless we're reasonably confident that they at a fundamental level are worth our consideration. The ones that don't end up making it, it's usually not because they're bad nonprofits. Far from it. It's usually just because they may not have that environmental focus.
Okay.
So that's, that would be the primary reason. And those are typically more of the member recommendation ones, just like for them to say, hey, would this fit or not? And then we're able to just make that assessment.
Great. I appreciate that. So, there are still a lot of companies, particularly in the outdoor industry, who, let's just say, are not contributing to environmental causes at the level that they could be.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to give a plea, a message to these organizations, what would you want them to think about?
I would say, a couple of things. One is increasingly we're seeing it's great for business. And so, that's been one really interesting thing. You described the company like approaching us, they've done the soul searching and that's great. And we do get a lot of that, but we actually really love it when a company comes to us and just says like, I think this would be a great business move. It's like, that's when we're going to start driving change. So consumers like this, they are increasingly attracted to brands that are making a social difference, and they're social or environmental difference. There's a lot of evidence to support that. So 1% for the planet represents a really clear way that a company can sort of step into that business opportunity. So that's one thing that I would say. The other is, if a company is trying to figure out like, what's the best place to put my money? Like I do want to do something, but like, why should I give to nonprofits? We would say, there are a lot of different things that you can do. And most of our companies are giving their 1% and doing X, Y, and Z also. Like there's a whole lot of things, but we would say the nonprofit sector plays a really important role. Companies also should be looking at their supply chain. If they have any investments, those should be impact investments. Like we need it all, but don't think that there's not a really critical role for the nonprofit sector. So businesses increasingly can do a lot, and that's great. And many of them are stepping into that. Many aren't, but businesses can play a role through how they operate, how they, function, what they invest in, all of that. Government can play a role and does more or less, sort of depending on what policies get put in place. But, government policy can be one of the biggest drivers of, change at scale. So that plays a really important role. But there's always a gap. There's always a space between what business can do and what government can do. And nonprofits live in that space, and we need to support them. So what nonprofits do in that space is they're able to go in and address issues where there may not be a market now, or there may never be a market. And so it's not a business opportunity, and government policy hasn't yet gotten in there and may never. So nonprofits can say, boom, we're going to address that. Nonprofits can, advocate between business and government for changes that, people would want. So like carbon pricing or things like that, whatever people think of that, like that's an example of what a nonprofit can advocate for, can pull together, businesses and individuals to be part of that advocacy too, so they can, build constituencies around certain issues. So that's like a short list, but there are a lot of things that nonprofits do in that space. And so for businesses, the opportunity is to play in a bigger total space. So then you have your business to work with and you have your giving to the nonprofit sector. So suddenly you have a much bigger reach in terms of how your business can be driving positive change. So it's kind of like, why wouldn't you do that? Why wouldn't you seek to do that? Because consumers want that, and the world needs it, and a sustainable planet needs it. And, and also your giving can be just such a big part of your story too. It really creates a powerful opportunity to, distinguish your brand and just add that depth to it.
Yeah, that's great. I was thinking about how transparent the world has become thanks to the internet, and I think there's a lot of people in the world who subconsciously maybe have a certain level of anxiety about how are they spending their money, and the companies that they're buying goods and services from, are they going to find out in a few months' time that, their labor practices are bad, or they're a greater polluter than anyone could have ever imagined. And, I think about, I keep on going back to Yvon Chouinard and Patagonia. I think not only does Patagonia make incredible products, and I've got a black hole bag that I've dragged literally across the globe with me, and the thing is indestructible. But there's a level of satisfaction that I know, knowing that bag is made out of recycled materials, and even listening to Yvon speak about, and this was years ago when I heard him speak in person, talk about the company's quest at the time to develop organic cotton sources that were so difficult to come by, a decade or more ago. And so I think it rests well on the conscience of consumers, knowing that they're purchasing products from companies that do support the environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it is very resonant with consumers. And what we have found too, and I think this is important also just for, companies, your question of if a company's not yet a member and why would I become a member? Our goal is not, we're not looking for perfect companies to join, because there aren't any perfect companies. We're looking to create change for the world in a good way that's good for business, good for the planet, good for people. And what we have seen time and again through our network is company joins, they make this commitment, they start giving, they start taking advantage of the opportunities to connect within the network, and they learn so much that they go from running their business and giving to giving and deciding that they need to run their business with zero plastic, figuring out how to do that, changing their product line as a result. And I'm this is a real company that has done this, and kind of transforming themselves. And their giving we continue to just certify their 1% giving, but their experience of being in the network creates a space and an opportunity for learning that enables them to do so much more. And they're example after example of that. And so, we see 1% for the planet as this great, sort of engine of change, where the giving is kind of how you get into it, how the engine gets going. But then so much more happens just by the power of smart, passionate people getting together.
Very good. Beautiful. I appreciate it. Well, I know today being Juneteenth, you have very important things to get onto. So I wish you all the success in the world, and I do so thank you for your time. So please check out 1% for the Planet and their website. I'll put up links on the YouTube link and on the podcast website so people can learn more. Thanks so much, and let's keep in touch.
Sounds great. Thanks, Calvin. I really appreciate it.
Bye-bye. That was Kate Williams, CEO of 1% for the Planet. To learn more about their organization, check out their website at 1percentfortheplanet.org. That's all letters, no numbers, as well as their presence on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Our theme music for the show is 500 Miles, composed by Barry Manning and performed by The Capacitors. Check out their website at thecapacitors.com. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our podcast and YouTube channel. You can also learn more about me, our guests, and our content by visiting the website outdoormindspodcast.com. God bless. See you next time.